Welcome to the Healthy Relationships Initiative podcast. Our goal is to provide information and tools to help you build happier, healthier, and safer relationships of all kinds. To learn more about HRI, please visit www.guilfordhri.org and check us out on social media at GuilfordHRI.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's Healthy Relationships Initiative Relationships Booster. Our topic for today is self-care for busy parents. The Healthy Relationships Initiative is a partnership between UNC Greensboro and the Phillips Foundation, and our mission is to promote happy, healthy, and safe relationships of all kinds. And we invite you to learn more about the Healthy Relationships Initiative by visiting our website at guilfordhri.org. Just a few little logistical details before we get started. We invite you to use the chat room throughout the program to submit questions that we can address throughout our conversation today. And the best way to do that is to send a message to our moderator, Camilla Dos Santos. And also just note that your questions will be submitted anonymously, and we also encourage you to use an anonymous username as an added level of confidentiality. And at the end of the program today, we'll be sharing a link for you to share some feedback with us because we're always working on improving our program. Our topic for today's Healthy Relationships Initiative Relationships Booster is self-care for busy parents. And our featured expert today is Rachel Hutto, and I'll introduce her in just a moment. My name is Christy Murray, and I'm the director of the Healthy Relationships Initiative, and I'm also a professor in the counseling department at UNC Greensboro. And our featured expert today is Rachel Hutto, and she is the owner of Be Still Counseling in Greensboro. And Rachel, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here.
And I look forward to talking with you today. So before we get started, could you share a little bit about your professional background and especially maybe what was interesting to you about this particular topic of self-care for busy parents?
Sure. Thank you. Glad to be here. Yes, I'm a licensed professional counselor. I was educated here, right, in UNCG almost a decade ago is when I graduated.
Yeah, it goes by really quickly.
Yes. So in that decade, I've been here in Greensboro working with families in all kinds of capacities. So really enjoyed the honor of doing that. And what really attracts me to this particular topic is at this point in my career, I have learned so much about the impact of stress, right? Like it's this chronic experience that all of us are navigating from a day-to-day basis. Some of these are small stressors, like running late for work, or bigger stressors that happen. And so I think that this understanding of stress is so important to the necessity, the essential nature of what self-care is. And I think it's really easy to minimize the importance of self-care in the root of the busyness that we get into each day. I think the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Psychological Association have both indicated that stress is a public health crisis. So that's pretty serious, something that we need to be talking about and supporting each other and doing more well in.
Yeah, and so, I know you have a lot of different experience working with a lot of different populations today, that I'm sure from people who've experienced really major traumas to people who are managing a lot of their stress too. So I'm sure you've learned a lot from your clients as well.
Yes. And my own work, right? I'm a human too that's navigating all of these things as well. So yes, a dearth of experience from all kinds of folks.
Yeah, great. Well, so let's get started with looking at our topic and really trying to understand why this topic is so important. And so, Rachel, through your practice, which is Be Still Counseling, you say that you strive to help people feel at home and at ease within themselves. So do you think people in general today, you touched on this a little bit, but do you think that people in general today are more stressed and more disconnected with themselves than people in other generations? And what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think it's a really important question, and I honestly don't know all the historical data to sort of say specifically how this generation compares to other generations, but certainly all generations have experienced war, violence, divorces, sexual traumas, like car accidents. accidents, those things are across generations. And so I don't know how this specifically compares, but I do hear people in my practice and in my friendships feeling really disconnected and highly stressed in today's climate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's hard to know exactly what it might have felt like in the past, but we definitely know people today are very stressed, and like you mentioned earlier, it's recognized now as even a public health crisis.
Yes, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So what about parents specifically? So we know that stress is a common thing in society, but let's talk for a minute about why are parents today under so much stress?
Yeah, so what I hear from a lot of the families that I work with is that parents are stressed about the things that many of us are, right? There's strains in their relationship with their partner. There's strains in their relationship with their children. Children are constantly going through transitions, and so there's strain there. There's many single parents and the demands of that. Also, many families are navigating the demands of co-parenting, which can be really stressful for some families, and navigating families living in different places. Also, parents are talking about, like, I have my kids to take care of, but then I also have my parents to take care of who are now aging, those kinds of stresses. So feeling pull between, you know, taking care of two different generations at the same time, you know, and then just the other day-to-day things, like, what are my children going to eat today? You know, how safe is our home today? How are we going to get to school and to work and be well, and all of those things. So I think the accumulation of the life space that people are in, but you know, again too, it's just the day-to-day things that all families have to navigate to keep on living. So I think the other thing that I hear parents talking about is that the technology landscape is changing, and so kids are having access to gaming and apps and phones and all kinds of online things that previous generations didn't have. It's just a different technology landscape, and so parents, particularly parents of teens, come in with a lot of stress around helping their children navigate that.
And I think for a lot of those stressors too, there's not a lot of models, or kind of we didn't see those certain things growing up, and so we are looking at some very new landscapes for parenting and what the stress of parenting can look like technology. We don't have those experiences of ourselves growing up and knowing what worked, or even single parent families as that's become more common, or working parents,
yes,
you know, doubly working parents. So there's just a lot of newness to the experience of parenting, which can definitely add to the stress.
Definitely. I mean, change in and of itself is stressful, right? So whenever you're having to figure out how to do something in the process of doing it, that has stress in and of itself, for sure.
Do you think also, to some extent, that parenting today is maybe stressful because of some of the influences of social media, and people feel some pressure to be perfect, or they look at these really nice pictures of other people in their network, and there's just maybe a higher level of pressure to be kind of performing as a parent or putting out these images? I don't know, sometimes I think about that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for some people that is a stressor. I don't think that, you know, every person responds to those demands in the same way, for sure, but I think certain personalities, depending on what your community looks like and your relationship with people looks like, I do hear people feeling stressed about, you know, those sorts of things and how to stay connected when so much of their lives are being displayed online. And so for some people, I think that it really, some recent research that I've read says that can really enhance relationships, right? So there's this duality to it, that not everybody's experiencing that kind of stress, but for some people, those platforms can increase stress, and for others, it's, you know, increasing their sense of connectivity. So it's a unique relationship with all this online possibilities.
Yeah, it can really depend a lot on the person, kind of what.
Yep.
And so I think that is an important point too, that every parent kind of stress, what their unique picture of stress looks like is going to be very individualized to them, depending on their family structure, their work status, the age of their children, how much technology is an influence, how much social media, how connected they are. And so that seems like an important practical takeaway point already, to think about just really understanding what parents should take some time, I think, to really evaluate what does their unique picture of stress look like?
Yes, right, exactly. What is my unique picture? Because I think that one of the things that folks will take away from this time day is that also your self-care needs to look unique to whom you are and what your life space is, right? So when you have this unique picture of how I experience stress or how my family experiences stress, it can help inform what does self-care look like, because there's not one right answer.
Yeah, so even just to spend some time reflecting on what are their top stressors for them, maybe why are those things the most stressful for them. So let's move more to talking about self-care and trying to understand that. So I love what you say about sort of helping people to feel at home and at ease with themselves. I know that for me conjures up a certain kind of image, or at least even just a feeling. Could you share what you mean by that, though?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the simplest way to think about this concept is being able to have an experience of a state of being at calm alert, right? So what we know about how we're designed as humans is that is our natural state of existing, right? So when we're not in a stress state, it's natural for us to feel like at calm alert, where I'm sort of engaged with the world, participating in what's happening, but I'm not doing that from an anxious place or a worried place or a depressed place, or right, that I can just engage with that in the way that people often talk about that sort of feeling like fluid. You hear a lot of terms, a lot of people using the term flow these days, right? So I think all of those experiences are reflecting some state of that being at calm alert. So when you're not in a state of reacting to a current stressor, right? So when we experience a stress, we're stressed out about something, but then have the ability to not stay stuck in that stress, but then to return back to this natural state of calm alert.
I love that idea of calm alert, because to me it makes me think somebody's equally at peace, but then also has energy. And I think when we think about with parents, a lot of times maybe that feels very balanced to me, whereas I think a lot of parents, as they're responding to stress, they may feel really low energy because they're not sleeping, or they're just really tired from all the demands, so they might not have the alert side of that, or they might be very anxious and feeling kind of a lot of the stress and tension, and that knocks them out of whack for the calm side of things.
Yes, absolutely. Being my parent myself, absolutely that. The real day-to-day demands make having access to both of those hard to do. Yeah. And I think the whole point of this conversation is that with some good self-care, you can return there more often. Right. And you can recognize that, okay, I'm feeling exhausted, or I'm feeling the strain of this, and I don't want to stay stuck here. How do I return, to a healthier way of being, which is closer to that experience of calm alert.
And that seems like another really good takeaway. We always, with the Healthy Relationships Initiative and any of our programs, really try to think about sort of easy takeaways, something really simple to put into practice. And I think, how am I doing in the calm alert status right now, I think could be a really great kind of self-check-in for parents. Am I calm? Am I alert? And just sort of having that self-awareness around that could be a really useful starting point.
Absolutely. You can like sort of catch yourself, like, yes. Like, all right, here's a clue.
Yeah.
Do I want to stay here, or do I want to do something different?
Yeah. Right, and even also kind of thinking about what direction might that go. Do I need more rest, or do I need to do something that's going to help build up my energy, or focus more on helping me have more peace too?
Right.
So within parenting then, what would it look like for a parent to really feel at home and at ease within themselves, especially even just thinking about a stressful parenting situation? Let's just say you've got a kid who's yelling or screaming or crying for any reason, and that can be very anxiety-provoking. So in the middle of a very stressful moment of a parent, what does that look like to be at home in themselves?
Yeah. Well, I think firstly, I would say that you got to practice that out of those high-stress situations, right? It's sort of like you can't show up for the Super Bowl expecting to do your best if you haven't been at practice all season long, right? So I think that it's I don't want to say that piece first. So it's really important that you're learning about what does the state of calm alert, the state of ease look like when you're not in those high stress, because the more familiar that becomes out of a stressful situation, the more accessible that's going to be available to you when your kid is screaming at you or whatever it is that they might be doing that's really stressful, right? So the thing about our emotional states is that they're transferable, right? So the state that I am in when I'm relating to my child, even if they're doing something that's really stressful, if that's amping up my anxiety, of course that would be natural for that to do. And if I'm taking care of myself to return to a greater state of regulation or ease, not to say in that stress state, then I'm not transferring additional stress into that situation that's likely going to escalate my child, and they're going to be in more difficult behaviors. They're going to be harder for me to manage. So the more stress that I continue to stay in, the more likely that situation is going to escalate and it's going to become more challenging for both you and your child and whomever else might be there. And the converse of that is true too. So, right, so if you're practicing these self-care things that are going to help you individually move to that state of calm alert at ease, then you can transfer that, right? So then you're showing up in that difficult situation where you're more likely to transfer that experience to your child rather than to escalate the stress and challenge.
And I think that's such a good point, because nobody could ever 100% be calm alert, right? You're not human if you're 100% walking around in the calm alert state. But if you develop some of those capacities or really that familiarity with being in that state, you might get knocked off, but it's going to be easier for you to return to the calm alert state. You can more quickly get back there and in a more healthy way.
Yes, it's exactly right. So it's not like, of course, it's not realistic for anybody to persistently stay in that state, but it is a measure, a guide, right, to like how am I, in relationship to that? Because life is dynamic. We as human beings are dynamic. We need our stress reaction to go off, actually, because if it never goes off, then we're not getting important information about what's going on in the situation or how we're responding. So we need it to do that. We just don't want to stay stuck there.
Right.
So the problem is that we run into that's creating this health crisis is that we're staying stuck in stress states, not learning from them, recognizing them, and returning back more towards that state of ease.
And I love that metaphor that you used about the Super Bowl. And I don't think a lot of people think about self-care in that way, that it's something that you should actually practice and that you actually need to practice in lower stress situations or even very calm situations to develop your capacity for it. Because then when you get to the Super Bowl, which is whatever the really highly stressful parenting situation that you might be in, that you need to be ready and prepared for that. And if you haven't practiced some of those tools, it's going to be hard for you to learn how to do that.
Yes.
That's great. I love that metaphor. So, and I think people often have some kind of misunderstandings about what self-care means. So, a lot of people, self-care, the first thing you think is getting a massage or taking a vacation or a day at the spa. But that isn't really what self-care is. So, how do you define self-care?
Sure. So, of course, I think going to a spa, getting a massage, those kinds of things can certainly be some ways in which people have access to self-care, take care of themselves in some way. So I think those things are inclusive of that, but if we are only defining self-care as that, then we're really missing the whole point, I think, of what self-care is about. So one of the practices that I use personally and in my practice is heart math. And so Doc Children of Heart Math says that true self-care must include the management of our thoughts and feelings, an often overlooked cornerstone of true self-care, right? So self-care is beyond showing up at a massage, right? So that can be it, but if we aren't managing the thoughts and the feelings in a day-to-day way, then those things are contributing to our stress just as much as anything else and are an important part of how we take care. I would also add that self-care is really about how are you shifting the felt sense of your body, right? So in a stress state, physiologically, our body moves into a state of constriction, a state of tension, a state of dis-ease, right? And so I think self-care is also learning about how do I tune into what my body is saying and how do I learn how to self-regulate those experiences as well, right? So the more stressed I am, the more physiologically dysregulated I am, the less my thoughts are available for me. They're just going to run away with me, right? But if I can regulate my body, then I have more of a chance to, shift my emotional state, interrupt some unhelpful thinking patterns that I might be stuck in. So we use this example of getting a massage, right? So we just show up and get a massage. That can be really great. It can feel really amazing in the moment. And maybe for 30 minutes or an hour or for the evening after that, we're feeling pretty good. But if we haven't addressed the things that were stressing us for the reason that we showed up there, the worrying that we were doing, etc., then we're just going to habitually go right back into that stressed reaction. And so I think that in the ideal world, you would go get a massage, right? And you would have some coping strategies around how you can shift your emotional state, how you can do your thinking, shift your thinking, and how you can self-regulate your body. And you can get a benefit of self-care without even getting a massage if you can also include those other important pieces of self-care.
I really like this definition and the way that you're describing it, because a lot of people, when they think about self-care, it's really focused on the tools or whatever the specific behavior, the step that the person's going to take, getting a massage, doing yoga, going for a walk, those sorts of things. But it's really, that's part of it, but the definition is really more broad, and it's thinking about how do I really take care of myself, and not just physically, but that's part of it, but it's also emotionally, your thoughts, your feelings, and looking at that, and then those tools become important strategies for how you take care of those other aspects of yourself more broadly.
Right.
But that's such a good point that, I mean, we all probably can think of people, or even maybe in our own personal experiences of where they get a massage and then they're just as highly anxious as right after that because they haven't addressed some of those underlying deeper issues around their emotions and their feelings.
Right. It's sort of like you miss all the benefit that the massage could provide to you, right? You sort of only get to absorb a little bit of what the massage, because massages can be really great, but if I haven't done these other pieces, then I've really sort of missed everything that I could bank from that experience.
Yeah, and it might help me for a very temporary, but thinking about self-care as a more deeper level practice to be engaging in. That way it's not go get a massage and then 30 minutes later already like being wound up and all tight and stressed out again.
Yeah, exactly. I think I really talk a lot with the folks I see in my practice about like self-care is a lifestyle choice, right? In the same way that, you know, what you choose to eat, the style of clothes that you choose to wear, you know, those kinds of things, where you go for your medical care, like those are lifestyle choices that we all make each day. And so I think thinking about self-care is not these particular behaviors that I do, but a lifestyle in which I'm choosing for myself about what I do day to day to just go through life.
It looks like we have a question.
We do. Oftentimes, being a new parent means that you're also discovering a new part of yourself and adjusting to a new routine. How can new parents figure out what that looks like for them in terms of self-care and how to squeeze it into an already busy routine?
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I mean, I think the new parenting experience is certainly a unique time in life, and that if anything close to what my experience is, like everything changes, right? Everything was a way of being, and now everything is changing. And so what I hope when we're talking about this much broader definition of self-care is that it isn't these big things. It's the accumulation of these like micro shifts that we can make over time to incorporate self-care. So I think, you know, what I would encourage for this new parent is like, how can I get 30 seconds of something, right? How do I, walk around my house twice today rather than not moving at all, right? We looked at, I think, how do we get these accumulation of these micro shifts so that it isn't like I have to make time to do this big thing, but it's that I am doing these little things. I think the most recent research that I read says that it takes about 30 seconds of engaging in some sort of self-care practice for you to get the benefit of that, right? So I think some of the things that I was doing when I was a new parent was that, like, I would just take 30 seconds to just focus on my breathing, right? So a really basic mindfulness practice. So my kid is sleeping, he doesn't want me to put him down, I'm holding him, but I can use that time to do a basic mindfulness practice, or I would listen to, a brief meditation on an app or something like that, that was incorporating that in a self-care practice into something that was already happening as a part of my life. Not that I had to go to a yoga class, which I would have loved to have done, but that wasn't available. But I could listen to, 30 seconds of a meditation, for example. So that's what I really encourage is this. That it can just be the accumulation of these really small things that over time creates a lifestyle where you're taking care.
I think, too, kind of along those questions, I know that question was about new parents, but I think that similarly can be really any stage, and you might have elementary school age or even teenage children. And one of the most important things is just sort of making the decision to do it and making yourself a priority. I think the demands of parenting are so great, especially with, let's say, a newborn or a little toddler. But there's a different set of demands that come when you've got an older child who has homework and different activities to be going to. And so really being able to say, I need to take time for myself in here too, whether it's with a new child or with an older child, to be able to really say, I need to take care of myself. I'm good at caregiving for my child. I need to be good at caregiving for myself too. And the temptation can be to put 100% of the focus on the child.
Sure.
But we need to also, as parents, really say, I'm going to put myself on that list too and make that decision to do that. And for a lot of people, they feel guilty doing that. And that is something that as a parent, I know I felt that way, especially when my kids were a lot younger, because their needs were so great that it felt selfish to, shift the focus on them. But really, I think especially the earlier that parents can start to think like this, to think that I need to take care of myself and take care of my emotions and my health and my well-being so that I can be the best parent that I can be.
Sure.
Because if I'm not familiar, like you were saying, if I'm not familiar with how to get into a calm alert state or a relaxed state, or however the person may define that, then every little thing is going to set me off. So I need to be able to practice that for myself. But it's not selfish at all, because it's something that actually really makes you be a better parent.
Sure, right, exactly. I would agree with that. And I think that, our kids are such mirrors about how well we're doing, right? And so whenever they experience us taking care of ourselves, they learn that for themselves. But also, like, our capacity to be present with them changes. We have more capacity to experience the joy and the less hard parts, because there are so many demands. I think it's constant, right? I remember getting to work and being like, I got to show up here. My mind is wanting to stay over there with my kid and how they're doing, right? So it's how do I really the impact that I have, including the impact that I have whenever I'm making choices to take better care of myself, because I know we can experience the changes in our capacity and how we can show up more lovingly, more generously, more mindfully, all of those things whenever we have capacity. When we stay in a stress state, ultimately, it's like having holes in your bucket. You're just constantly being drained, constantly being drained, constantly being drained. And it's hard to be the kind of loving parent that we want to be whenever we aren't being restored, right? And so self-care is what helps us restore, so that we're not in a constant state of drain that clearly the demands of parenting every day can do. So.
Yeah, the bucket metaphor is such a great one, because as a parent, you're just pouring yourself out into this child or teenager or whatever age. And so if you are not somehow filled up yourself, you don't have as much to pour out to them, and your capacity to really pull yourself into your parenting is going to be diminished.
Yes.
So I think a lot of people also feel, because I think some of these misconceptions about self-care is that it is going to the spa, getting a massage, things like that. I think a lot of people really commonly think it's out of reach potentially for them for whatever reason. Oh, well, I'm a single parent, so it would be impossible for me to do that. Who's going to watch the kids? Or I work long hours, or I don't have the money, so I can't do self-care. That's something that only certain people can do. So is self-care something that's accessible to all parents, or does it require a certain income level or a certain family status?
Yeah, so I think that really that's about what we've already talked about, which is like, can you make a commitment to a lifestyle, right? So for some people, they are going to get a massage to take care of, but that it doesn't look like that at all, really. I think that it's these simple things, relatively simple, but it's the accumulation of these smaller things over time that make it self-care. So when I think about having a busy life, what happens when I reassociate a stoplight as an opportunity to check in with my own breath? We know that breathing activities can help move a stressed body that's in a highly tense state to one that's in more of ease, right? And so if I make that association, I'm sitting at a stoplight for 5 seconds or 3 minutes, like I have that opportunity to use that to take some self-care. So I'm still engaged in the life and the things that I have to do, but I'm making a shift to do that. Or if I find myself being really worried and anxious about something, I can take 10 seconds to count backwards from 100 by 7. And what that does is just interrupts that thought process, right? So it's like I'm less likely to be continuing to feed that anxious thought pattern, which is going to lead my body into being in a greater state of stress and tension, right? So I think most of us, if we get into the lifestyle habit of it, have 10 seconds to take care of ourselves in some way, or the time that it takes us to sit at a stoplight, or on your bus ride home. You don't choose to play a game, you choose to listen to a meditation, or read something that is inspiring to you, or so I think it's about how are we using big spaces between the things that we're doing to use those for self-care rather than to just keep ourselves busy, immediately jumping into the next things. But again, the research says it takes about 30 seconds, right? So I think most of us, if we get into the practice, have 30 seconds, many places throughout our days. I think that it's about trying out some self-care practices and figuring out which are the ones that work uniquely for your lifestyle that can be easily integrated in those little places.
And that's so powerful to realize self-care, it can be something where you're sort of taking a break from your daily routine, but really it's more powerful and so much more accessible and doesn't have to cost any money and doesn't have to really take even much time, that it's just something when you can really integrate it into your day. And it doesn't have to be a lot to make a powerful difference for people.
Yes, exactly. So that's what I hope people will hear in this more than anything, is that you don't have to do something for 30 minutes or an hour or hour and a half, right? It's the accumulation of these smaller things over time that trains your body how to return to that state of ease rather than to that state of stress, right?
So people really, I think it's helpful if people really think through kind of how can I make this the most simple for myself.
Yes.
And I think too, just thinking through kind of what are my barriers or what are my hang-ups? Like, do I feel guilty about taking a few minutes for myself that I'm taking away from my children? And then if that's what a person's barrier might be, then how can they do something to help themselves feel better about that? So, for example, if I'm going to take a minute to just take some deep breaths, and maybe I'm not focusing on my child and I'm, just paying attention to myself and just getting calm, maybe they make the decision that after that minute's over, they spend an extra minute really focusing on their child and building that relationship so that they're kind of working through whatever it is that made you feel guilty about or whatever's keeping you from it, just breaking through some of those barriers. Because I think a lot of people it becomes an excuse to say, well, I can't do this, or I'm so busy that I can't take time away from my kid.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can think about different ways to kind of work through some of those things, I think that can be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what Heart Math is talking about, that like true self-care really has to look at the evaluation around our emotional reactions to things, our thinking patterns around things, including, feeling guilty about. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk more. We know a lot of families today are really, really busy, and that is just a very common challenge for pretty much everyone today, depending on, kind of, it looks different for different people, but everybody's busy. We know that's sort of like the disease of busyness is sort of one way that I've heard it described. So
haven't heard that, but that
resonates.
resonates.
I've also heard, too, people say that in our culture it's become like I'm busy has become kind of a status symbol because, I'm busy, I have so much to do, so it's almost like we want to be busy.
Yeah.
It would be not a good thing if we're not busy. So how do we get out from underneath that? There is such a weight to being so busy and scheduled and just feeling really overwhelmed, even just by looking at your schedule and seeing as a family how busy you are. So how do you get out from under that as a family, as a parent, and think about how do you make more time for self-care and also for more quality time? And we touched on it a little bit and think about how can I take 30 seconds at the stoplight, which is such a great idea because we all do that every day in some way. So building it into your everyday routine. But how do we think kind of also more broadly about how this is connected to busy schedules?
Yeah, so I think ultimately it's part of what you were just talking about, Christine, in terms of like being able to observe your life a little bit and like what is this guilt about or what is this busyness about? I think it's ultimately busyness is this choice that we consciously or unconsciously made about what's important to us, right? So we have a value on looking busy and how that's interpreted to people in the community, for example. What does that mean about my status if I'm busy? What does that mean about, et cetera? Like, so what are the values? What are the things that I have consciously or unconsciously stated are important to me that causes me to be busy? So I think that is really hard work to do, but I think it's a really important part of how we unbury ourselves because the busyness isn't going to stop unless you make a different choice about what's important to you, right? So if you continue that working long hours is important to you because your image and your profession is important to you, you're not going to make a change about being less busy. You have to be willing to do that really hard work about looking at what your values and what's important, because you can always come up with an excuse to be too busy.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's never a loss or too few things that there are opportunities to do. So we all always have so many opportunities. So I think that is really setting a lot of boundaries around your schedule, looking at if you and your family are just so stressed and you even think, well, even the thought of taking 30 seconds or even just a couple minutes, and where would I even find that time? That might be a sign for somebody to really consider that maybe they have too much that they've put on their plate.
Sure.
And then how do they go back and really say, okay, I want to prioritize my self-care, knowing that in time for my family and knowing that that's part of self-care. And maybe it means taking a few things, a few responsibilities, or learning to say no more to certain things. But but definitely, I think your points about kind of making that as a decision, and the schedule's not going to change unless somebody makes a decision to change it.
That's right.
Yeah, because it has to be an intentional choice.
Yes. Right, and decisions like that I can do something besides be busy all the time. Like when I was growing up, my dad used to always say stress is a choice, and I was like, what is he talking about? And then the more that I've lived my adult life and come into this work, that I think that stress is the reflection of a series of choices that we've made. We want to have our kids at swim practice and at tutoring and here and here and here and here, and it's like, golly, and we're just spread so thinly where it doesn't feel like even 30 seconds is available. And again, I think that's really hard work to have to look more clearly about what is my busyness reflecting to me about what I am saying is important. And if I'm important in here too, I have to make it that choice.
Yeah, and it might look like even scheduling out time, like when is that one time a week when you could find a yoga class that you could go to, or even not even a yoga class, just go take a 10-minute walk out in the neighborhood. And often people feel guilty or kind of weird about putting themselves on the calendar, scheduling time for themselves. But I think that too can be something that people kind of need to work through. It's a barrier that you need to kind of overcome to say, who says it's weird to put 30 minutes for me to go take a walk at the end of the day? Or, if you could even, I'm thinking, you used the red light example, but you could even put a couple of times during the day an alert on your phone to just check in and take a few deep breaths. And that might feel really silly to people who aren't used to thinking like that, but to building that into your schedule too.
Yeah.
So thinking about adding things into your schedule that are promoting self-care and then possibly putting more limits around your schedule.
Sure.
I think it's helpful too for sometimes to take a season. So people might be like, well, I can't take my kids out of all activities, you know, it's important for my kids to be in activities or sports or whatever, and you know, there's only so much you can do about maybe your work schedule. But maybe what if it was for a week or a couple weeks or a month or even just one season of the year where you said, we're just going to take a break, you know, and then think about what we want to add back in.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So whenever you first asked that question, I had two thoughts, right? And one was the one I just said, and then the other one is like, how do we try this out a little bit at a time, right? Like, how do we? Does it have to be when we make a decision or when we're trying to figure out what self-care looks like? You might have to practice a lot of different things until you find the unique series of things that works for you and your family, right? Because as we said earlier in this interview, like, there isn't one right answer. Like people have different capacities. We have different demands at different times, right? You have a change of job, like in your family, right? That's going to be a season where you might need to do something a little different. So I think I would really encourage people to just try some things.
Right, yeah.
A little bit at a time. It doesn't have to be a forever commitment, but what are the things that we can figure out that work for us? And to repeat those things, those little things over and over again to have that ultimately the accumulation of change where we have a breath in our family. We're not just busy all the time.
Right, yeah, creating that space for that.
Yeah. So there's this quote that I love from this Nobel Prize-winning author, Herman Hesse. He says, my advice to the person suffering from a lack of time and from apathy is this: to seek out each day as many as possible of the small joys. Right? So that is not adding something else into my calendar. That isn't about like I got to find room in my calendar to go to yoga class or to take a walk. But it's about like that, like from moment to moment, I can make a decision about what's joyful here.
And what I'm choosing to focus on. Am I choosing to look at a more stressful, energy-draining aspect of the situation or the more positive, uplifting side of a situation, even a challenging situation? And there, of course, there are some really challenging situations that it's hard to find positive in, but a lot of times, you know, you might be stressing out about something at work or stressing out about balancing work and your children. And of course, those stresses are very real, but if in the midst of that thought process you think, how lucky am I to have a job and a child? You know, that I'm thankful that I have this, and just that gratitude seems like a piece of it too.
Yeah, I mean, I think people have been practicing gratitude for generations and generations, but we now have all these neuroscientists that are telling us that it actually does make a difference. But it's a relatively simple but important shift of attention. Like, what in this scenario gets my attention? So I'm experiencing that I'm feeling stressed about this, and I can stay attached to this stress, or I can shift my attention to something that I have gratefulness for. So it's like that's part of that, the mental shifting, right, is that practice of gratefulness that allows us to have the ability to shift attention. When we're in a highly stressed state, we haven't practiced self-care, it's hard to shift that attention, but with the repetition of that, we have more opportunity to do something different.
Let's see, in terms of, we had a couple more about the scheduling, but I wanted to shift ahead to a couple other pieces. So what other pointers do you have just really generally about self-care? Do you have any other kind of suggestions for the people who are viewing this program that you would add at this point?
In terms of like specific practices, or?
Yeah, any other specific practices that you would recommend?
Yeah, like, so I could talk about them, or we could practice them together, however you want to do.
All right, let's practice one together. That sounds fun. I'm a little scared, but let's try it.
All right, so we already talked four things that sort of stand out to me. One that was talking about this was the gratefulness practice. And so that one, I think I mention it because it's important for being able to help make shifts in emotions, right? So getting my attention. But one of the things that I love the most is heart math. So heart math is also a tool that helps us shift our emotional state. So imagining that we just got an email from someone and they messed everything up that we had planned for a meeting, and now we got to redo it all, and it's like in 10 minutes, and we're no stressed.
Okay, yep, I can easily find myself in that situation.
Yes, right. So heart math practice is a couple steps. One is about firstly catching yourself being in that stress state, right? So like you gotta stop for a moment, like, all right, so I'm feeling stressed. But then to shift your attention towards something that you have appreciation or gratefulness for, right? We just talked a bit about that. So it can be anything. I'm grateful that I have water to drink right now. I'm grateful that the sun is shining. So you shift your attention, your mental attention, to something that you have gratefulness for. And then you imagine as if your breath were moving through your heart, right? So we know that literally you breathe with your lungs, but if you could imagine as if your heart were doing the breathing. So you just take a few seconds to hold that appreciation. We'll maybe take 30 seconds. Yeah, and so then to notice what happens when I take that time to do that. I personally am noticing that my breath is a little bit deeper. I'm noticing that my heart's been beating a little bit faster during this process because it's just a little anxious for me to be here doing this, but I'm noticing that it's beating less fast.
Yeah, I just noticed when I stop to pause like that it just helps me to feel recentered and kind of calms my mind.
Yeah, right. So again, we did that in 30 seconds by shifting our attention towards something that we have gratefulness, appreciation, thankfulness for. One person asked me one day, said, "Can I be thankful for Bojangles?" And the answer is yes.
Why not? Yeah.
Yes. If that's what you have appreciation for today, it can be Bojangles. It doesn't have to be some, I think some folks sort of get caught up around that it has to be something meaningful or important, but it could be Bojangles. Because guess what? They got you out the door today and you ate breakfast, and that was an important way for you to take care of yourself too.
Yeah.
Right? So I like that one a lot. It's easy to incorporate. I think another one that comes to mind are just some body scans. So body scans are a useful tool for helping us to just check in with, like, what's my body saying about this situation? We talked earlier in this interview about how that's important. So you do a body scan simply by paying attention to, like, starting at the top of your head, and then sometimes people imagine sort of like as if water was sort of floating over their body, or maybe like some like warm lava, right? So something that's going to help move your attention from your head down across your face and into your neck and shoulders to all the way till you get to your toes. And it's not that most people automatically settle a little bit because of that, but it also just gives you a clue about how stressed am I right now? How far away am I from that state of calm alert that could be possible for me? So it can be settling in and of itself, but it also could give you a clue about maybe there's something else that I need to be doing right now. Maybe I'm still really stressed, and so I'm going to, walk around my office building once and come back to my office and then reply to that email.
And I think all of these are really helpful because they are so quick and just something that you can do. I know I tend to hold all my tension in the back of my shoulders, and just being aware of that, of like, oh, am I holding, are my shoulders up, and just be like, okay, I can let them down and I can relax a little bit. And so it doesn't have to be anything major, but I think the example that you gave about the stressful situation of something, is due, there's a meeting in 10 minutes, and oh my goodness, I have to do this. And we would think, oh, I should use every ounce of that 10 minutes to re-prepare for the meeting.
Right.
But actually, if I take 30 seconds to do the gratitude and the breathing, or to do a body scan and release some tension, then I'll make better use of that 9.5 minutes than I will if I just try to in my stress state. And I think there's parallels in parenting too, because in parenting you may have 3 minutes in the bathroom, before you have to go back out and deal with your child who's having a tantrum or your teenager who's giving you a bad attitude. But if you can make use of the 2 minutes or 3 minutes of quiet time, even take a break for thinking, okay, how am I going to handle this situation, or how am I going to respond, you're going to be better able to handle that situation than if you are always trying to do something about the stressful situation.
Yes, right. So the more that we do, the more that we're perpetuating that sense of stress and tension, right? And so literally what we know is that neuroscientists are telling us all the time, the more stressed that we are, the less likely that we are to make good decisions, the more likely that we are going to have an emotional reaction that we feel badly about later. Like, I wish I hadn't have screamed at my kid, or I wish I would have been more kind about that, or whatever, right? So the more that we can self-care and regulate first, we're able to show up in ways that it doesn't create more problems. Like in terms of like, now I got to apologize for yelling at them, and the accumulation of that happens when we don't settle first.
Yeah.
And then
go ahead.
Yeah. And right, and again, it doesn't have to be much. I just hope people can hear that over and over again. It doesn't have to be much for there to be a big impact.
Yeah, that's great. Question?
Sure. Is it possible for couples to practice self-care together, and do you suggest any specific strategies for couples who may want to try it together?
That's an interesting question. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, do it. I mean, I think like anything that you can imagine as self-care, sure, do it together. I think that there is a lot of information that teaches us about co-regulation, right? And so if we're parenting together and we have the capacity to regulate ourselves together, to be more in that state of calm alert together, that's going to benefit all of you. I think that and it can only enhance the closeness in your relationship to practice self-care together. So, that could look like things like, we're going to take this pause together and breathe in this way together. We're going to take this walk together. I think also when you have practices as a couple of practicing self-care together, you can help support each other and be like, and not in a harsh kind of way, but like, I'm noticing that you're having a hard time with this. I'm going to encourage you to go take 30 seconds, right? Because you're doing that work together. There's more of a commitment to supporting each other and doing what. So at any given moment, one person in a partnership might have more capacity than the other. Someone's had a more difficult day than someone else. Like, go, I'll clean up the spilled milk.
Yeah, I think it's really just kind of along the lines of what you're talking about, just important to talk about that and make that something that you're communicating about, and making that a priority that is shared between couples in a relationship, and so, or partners in a couple relationship. And so, yeah, they can support each other through that. Let them know, I'm trying to practice more self-care maybe. Can you help me with that? Like, let me know when I seem really stressed out. Or sometimes it might be, let's take that pause together. Sometimes it might be, you go take a 2-minute pause, come back, let me take a 2-minute pause, you know, and I think a lot of what we've been talking about today, our focus is really on self-care and parenting, but self-care is just as important in any kind of relationship and couple relationships. And I would say, too, the only other thing that I would add about this for in the parenting context is some people are single parents, and so they may not have a partner that's readily available, but I think self-care, a part of self-care is nurturing other types of relationships around them. So it might be making sure they have friendship support or extended family support, who they can be working together in their self-care.
Absolutely.
Let's see. So as we're coming to the end of our time today, let's just sort of start to think about any more kind of small-scale tips that even busy parents can do to really just kind of start. Like, what's a good first step? If somebody's maybe listening to this and they're thinking, gosh, I have been putting so much focus on my child and maybe my work and other demands in my life, and maybe they feel like they need a complete overhaul. But what would be a good starting point for somebody looking to start to do more self-care in their life?
Yeah, so I'm going to just sort of say some things in general and figure out how they fit into your life. But I think things like, can I write down 5 things that I'm thankful for today? Can I start my day or end my day in that way? Can I not get out of bed right when the alarm clock goes off, but to take a few seconds to check in with my breath, to have a positive thought. I've read an article not too long ago that was talking about the stress over the course of a day being highly correlated to how is it that you're thinking about your day to begin with, right? So if you're taking time at the beginning of your day to set an intention or to have a positive thought or something, right? Like, gosh, I'm just really looking forward to it being sunshiny today, right? Like that is not anything specific about the work that I have ahead that day or the parenting task I have about that day, but it's something about the association that I'm bringing in at the start of the day. So that's something that's really relatively simple. You just have to have the intention of doing that. I think taking a few moments to stretch, right? So just like lifting your arms above your head, for example, that in and of itself can be regulating to your body, right? So you can do that in the shower, right? Just have your hands just straight up. So I think that it's about, so there's meditation practices and yoga practices, all these things, but it's about like where is it that I might have enough interest that I could begin trying something, right? It could be, there's a lot of like thought management strategies. I mentioned one earlier about how am I counting backwards from 100 by 7. I really like that one because it really makes, you can't do that. It's not like 5 where you can do that sort of without thinking. Counting backwards by 7 really causes you to do that pause. Like, so I have to force my brain to do something else besides be on that runaway, anxious train. So those are some.
Yeah, it sounds like.
Does that help?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it just really sounds like the best starting point is just to start and not to worry about, oh, I've got to get this perfect self-care plan and then a week from now I'm just going to be managing everything better. I'm just going to be this calm parent who handles everything with ease. But just to start, just take small steps. Know that it might take some time to figure out what's going to work best for you, but don't let it be this big, intimidating thing, and just start with it. So do you have any other kind of final thoughts before we wrap up, since we're coming to the last little bit of our time here?
Yeah, I would say that but what I hope for more, and you mentioned this earlier, is that like self-care isn't selfish, it's actually essential. So you can take away that from this time that it's essential, and a little bit of time goes a long way.
That's such a great point. And I think my kind of last thought that I'll add to that just relates to that, maybe even says the same thing in a different way, but I think as a parent, how you care for your child or your children, it's just as important how you care for yourself in that process. And so caring for yourself is going to help you more effectively care for your child at whatever age that they are. So thank you so much, Rachel. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and as a busy parent myself, I've learned a lot, and I realized that I need to do more self-care myself too.
Always.
But we thank all of you for being part of this program today, and we hope that you learned some helpful strategies to help practice more self-care in your own life, and that that's something that is beneficial for your relationships. Before you sign off today, Camilla has shared the link to our feedback form, so please take a moment to fill that out before you sign off. And our next relationship booster will be 2 weeks from today on Friday, May 17th, and our topic is going to be problem solving for couples for that one. So thanks so much for being here today, and we hope to see you back for another program.